Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the Google Pixel 4. A lot of other people have been taking a look at this week as well because they sent out a bunch of these to reviewers. And my hope is here to give you a good overview as to what the phone is all about without getting too far into the technical weeds. We'll have a couple of techie sections here or there, but my goal here is to give you a very general consumer view of what this phone is about. We're going to step into it in just a second. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that Google sent this phone to the channel free of charge. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this new Google phone is all about. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This is a flagship phone, so it comes in at a flagship price. The smaller of the two Pixel 4s available begins at $799 for a 5.7-inch display. This one is the 6.3-inch XL edition that sells for $899. Beyond the larger screen on the XL, you also get a larger battery. So if battery life is important to you, you'll probably want to get the larger phone. But beyond the screen and the battery, the phones are otherwise the same from a performance standpoint. I am surprised by how compact it feels for a large phone. If you take a look at my iPhone Pro 11 that we looked at a couple of weeks ago, this is the 5.8-inch iPhone 11, and it really isn't all that much larger than the smallest iPhone. So if you're looking for a small flagship, I think that 5.7 might be a really good choice because it will be smaller than this one and probably smaller than the smallest iPhones. So that's something to think about as you're looking for things. This is powered by a Snapdragon 855 processor. You'll be hearing some reviewers giving Google heat for that choice because it's not the latest and greatest processor, and typically we expect the latest and greatest in a flagship phone. I don't think it makes that much of a difference here, primarily because no one's really taking advantage of the processing power that is available in some of these top-end chips, and this phone performs very adequately for all the things that you might do with it. So I'm not going to ding them too hard on that. It feels like a nicely performing phone. It's got 6 gigabytes of RAM, which means that you can easily switch between applications. And when you're doing stuff like this and having a YouTube video run in the background, you're not going to see a lot of lag as you're moving around to different things. It also feels faster because these displays are running at 90 frames per second a lot of the time. So it just feels snappier because it's running at a much higher frame rate. Most phones, including the flagship iPhone here, run at 60 frames per second. And it was funny, using this phone for a couple of days, going back to my iPhone Pro 11 felt kind of slow because of the fact that this display is just running at a faster refresh rate and just feels snappier as a result of that. So the RAM and the frames per second here really do, I think, make an impact. And I was very pleased with the quality of the OLED display that they've placed into this phone. It really is super crisp. You've got very nice contrast ratios because it's an OLED panel. Overall, you're going to be very pleased with this, and it will certainly live up to the flagship price that you are paying for the phone. It's got Gorilla Glass 5, which should be relatively sturdy, but you'll want to put a case or something around it just to be safe. The larger display does have a higher pixel density, 537 points per inch on this display versus 444 on the smaller phone. Text looks great. Everything just looks really nice on this display, and you'll be very pleased looking at it throughout the day. Now, the weight on the phone is 6.8 ounces or 193 grams. The smaller phone is less heavy, 5.7 ounces or 162 grams. It feels really nice and solid. I really like the thickness of the glass here. Again, just a very good experience. Now, the overall fit and finish of the phone is pretty nice here. It's all glass front and back. You have 2 cameras here on the back, which we're going to be spending some more time on in a few minutes. It lacks, though, the ultra-wide lens that most of the other flagship phones now have. I have that on my iPhone Pro 11. I really like that lens. It's been fun to shoot with it, primarily because you get such a wide point of view, but it also allows for different types of compositions. This lacks that. But unlike the prior Google phone, this one now has a second lens, so you do at least get a wide angle and a telephoto, but not the ultra wide that you're seeing on other phones, and I'm sure your friends are talking about. Front of the phone here looks very nice, as you saw already. You do have a larger bezel here at the top, which incorporates the selfie camera as well as a radar system, which we'll get to in a second. and a sensor for face unlocking. The face unlock, as you can see here, is super fast. You just have to glance at it briefly and it lets you in. My big issue, though, with the face unlock is that it will work when your eyes are closed. And that's one thing the iPhone requires, is for your eyes to be open, and it won't unlock if somebody's prying your eyelids open or something. You actually have to be awake and aware and looking at the phone. What this phone will do is unlock even when you're sleeping, and unlike a fingerprint reader where somebody has to pick up your finger and put it on the fingerprint sensor, here they can unlock the phone without you even knowing that they're doing it, and I think that's a big issue. I'm guessing it's a software thing that they can correct. I think the initial discussion about this phone was that it would unlock only when your eyes are open, so I would expect them to improve that in a future firmware update. But for now, if you are working in a very sensitive field, I would probably avoid using the face unlock feature. Unfortunately, there are no other biometrics on the phone. There's no fingerprint reader, so the face unlock is the only unlock there is. And it just works really well, probably too well for some folks. Again, turn it off if you are in a sensitive environment and go back to using a passcode. Now, there's not much for ports on this phone. You can just plug in your SIM card here on the left-hand side on that SIM tray. It supports all of the major carriers here in the US, and I would imagine it will support most carriers worldwide. You've got nice stereo speakers on it. You've got one here at the bottom, and the other one will come out of the handset speaker. Sounds pretty nice. It feels like it's on par to me with my iPhone Pro 11, so it's a good flagship experience when you're just on a speakerphone call or watching a video or something. The speaker's nice and loud and good stereo separation on it. Again, on par with other flagship phones. Next to the speakers at the bottom, you've got a USB Type-C port. The issue that I have with this port is that it doesn't support at the moment display out. So you can get things charging through that port. You can get some of your USB devices connected to it, but no display output. And if you're looking at a flagship phone and maybe deciding between this one and the Samsung, Samsung's got a really cool feature called DeX. So when you plug in the HDMI adapter to your phone, you can actually get kind of a desktop computer experience out of your phone. A lot of people like that. This one won't even give you a screen mirror at the moment, but I think Google's working on their own version of DeX, and I would imagine this port is capable of it. It's just not enabled at the moment. So if you are looking for external display mirroring, you'll need to use an Android TV or a Chromecast or something like that. You've got your volume rocker here and your power switch there, and that is pretty much it. There is no headphone jack, so you'll need to get a USB-C to headphone adapter to have it dangle off the phone here, or switch over to some Bluetooth headphones to get headphones wired into this device. Now, battery life on the phone feels pretty good to me. Google advertises all-day battery life, which is what most people advertise these days, and you will get through a day under most circumstances. If you're playing a lot of games and you're far from your cell phone tower, those things might impact battery life a little more significantly. But in my experience, doing all of the things that I typically do with my phone throughout the day, taking a few videos, doing some photos, web browsing, email, all the things that I do on social media, I was ending with about 25% or so in the tank at the end of the day before I started charging. I suspect that you'll feel a little more constrained on the smaller phone, and the reason is that the larger phone here again has the larger battery, 3,700 milliamp hours versus 2,800 on the other phone. So if battery life again is important to you, this will probably be the one to go with. It supports USB-C fast charging. You'll get an 18-watt charger in the box, and you can also charge wirelessly here on the back of the phone by placing it down on a Qi-compatible charger. We tested that a little bit earlier, and it was able to charge up just fine. It is running Android 10, which is the latest version of Android. Google says they will update the phone for a minimum of 3 years. They don't really guarantee a length of time of support, but I believe they've been pretty good with the prior editions of their phones and keeping them up to date. So it'll probably last you until the big 5G turnover occurs, and at that point you'll need a new handset because this one will not support 5G. Now what I want to do now is jump into a few of the unique features that they are offering on this new phone. One is that it has some really cool transcription capabilities. So if I load up their recorder app and start talking, you can see how accurately it can convert my speech to text, even if I talk at a rather fast rate of speed. and it even is correcting itself as it is going here. I've been very impressed with this feature. This is unique to the Pixel 4. However, and this is a big however, this app will actually run on older versions of Google phones if you sideload it. So they have purposely just kept this off of their older phones, even though it will work on them. I hope they change their mind about this because this really is working well. This even works when the phone is offline. So it's not relying on an internet connection to do this accurate level of transcription here. It's a very impressive feature. I think if you are a reporter or somebody that wants to take minutes at a meeting, this might be really useful for that. And I was really pleased with how well that's working there. Now, another unique feature of the phone is its onboard radar system. They're using this in a couple of different areas. I would guess the most useful use of it would be if the phone is ringing and you don't want to pick it up, you can just wave your hand over it and it will dismiss the call or the notification that just popped up. You can also use it when you're in apps like Google Play Music here. I can just swipe my hand across to skip to the next track. However, I'm finding it's not always working that accurately. Sometimes I have to do it a couple of times for it to pick me up. Overall, I've not been all that impressed with it. So it's maybe something that may have some utility later, but it's really not all that accurate. It doesn't have a lot of resolution, so it can't detect individual fingers, for example. And generally, I'm finding that it's not always doing what I want it to do. So this, I think, needs a little bit more improvement before I'm able to say it's a killer new feature. Right now, it just feels kind of gimmicky to me. Now, phones these days are certainly more camera than phone, and this one is no exception. Google added a new camera to the back of their phone. The prior editions had a single camera. This one has two. You've got a telephoto lens that shoots at 16 megapixels with a 2.4 aperture. The other lens is a wider angle, not ultra wide though, shoots at 12.2 megapixels with a 1.7 aperture. And I'm finding that there's not a lot of control that I have over which camera is used. On the iPhone, you can explicitly select one of the lenses to use. This one, you have to kind of zoom things in a bit and try to get it to where you want it to be. So right now, if I go to 2x, I'll be using that telephoto lens, and then if I switch it off of that, it will switch to the other one. But you don't really know when that switch occurs. You can see a little color difference here as I'm bringing it in. What's neat about it, though, is that it's got a very nice auto-focusing system that can lock onto an object. You have some control over your image quality here, both brightness and I believe contrast to some degree here too. So it's kind of nice to get all these things lined up. You have portrait mode, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes, which can blur out the background. But with portrait mode, you don't really get a preview of what it's going to look like until after you shoot the image. There's also a night sight mode, which does really well in low light, including a new Astro photography mode, which I'll show you in a few minutes as well. So it looks nice, but again, on the portrait mode, you got to take the picture and then wait for all the post-image processing to see how it's going to look when it's done. And the iPhone, of course, gives you a better preview as you're shooting those images. But I'm finding with the portrait mode that things look a little bit better than the iPhone in most cases. So let's jump in, though, to some image quality samples that I shot a little bit earlier so you can get a better feel for what the camera is capable of. This shot was out of its wider angle lens. It looks nice here, as you can see, a lot of good detail to that one. Here's one that I shot out of the telephoto lens. That blur in the background is natural just from the optics of the lens. It's got that 2.4 aperture, which gives you a nice bokeh here, as you can see, and really good detail out of it. So that was really nice. Here's a shot of my dog in portrait mode. What's nice is that it's very selective about the blur and how much to use at different times. Very nice detail on these portrait mode photographs, and overall I've been very pleased with the image quality out of the cameras here, just doing basic stuff. Then I did some comparatives. So this is my daughter, again, shot in portrait mode. And I was really pleased with the detail that they're able to pull out of the hair. A lot of times with these portrait mode photos, it's hard to get things to look right when you've got these fine strands of hair. The iPhone just tends to blur everything to make it blend in better with the background. Google's taking a little more risks perhaps with their interpretation. There's a little bit of weirdness here with the couch that's in the background, but generally it does a really nice job with these portrait mode photos, and I think the addition of that second camera really improved things. They were doing some pretty amazing stuff with their single camera on the prior editions. So adding the second camera now gives them some additional data to work with to improve this even further. Here's a similar shot at the same time I took with my iPhone. The iPhone shots tend to be a bit softer, as you can see. And also it does a lot of blurring here around her ponytail, as you can see. We're not getting that detail that we had before, and a little bit of weirdness here on the left-hand side. So overall, I think they've done really well with this portrait mode. Here's another example. You can see the fine detail of the hair here in a portrait mode photo, whereas on the iPhone, it just kind of blurs it out. The color, of course, looks different also, and it really it depends on what you're in, what the lighting is in the room that you're at. And it will interpret from there. And it looks like the iPhone just interprets images differently than Google does. It doesn't mean it's a worse image. It just means that how they code the AI on each platform will impact the quality and the color that you'll have of the image after it is shot. But overall, I was very, very pleased with the portrait mode here versus the iPhone. I do think it's better. It's not perfect, though. So when you see things like this, which is very difficult to process, you can see there's a weird blurry area here, but not over there. So there will be moments when the camera will not be as perfect as you just saw here, and that's going to be the same on just about any platform that you work with. The only way to really get a good true bokeh is to use an SLR with a nice fast lens. But these phones are really catching up, and I was very pleased with the amount of sharpness and detail in the portrait mode photos that the Google Pixel 4 is shooting. Another neat thing about the Pixel 4 that impressed me was even in portrait mode, it's able to grab moving images really well and have a very sharp image as a result. So my daughter here was actually running through the frame, and it was able to grab her and get a really nice sharp image here and then blur the background in addition to that. I've had a number of instances where this didn't work and I just had a big blur of a kid running by, but it was certainly working better than my iPhone did at these kinds of shots, and that was another differentiator that I noticed while playing with this. So Google's got the computational photography down quite well here, and I think there are a number of images that the Pixel 4 might give you that you might not get on the flagship iPhone, so that was good. The front-facing camera will also do the depth perception because it does have that face sensor, so you can see a shot I took with it a little bit earlier. One thing that I have since switched off is the face smoothing. It just doesn't look natural to me. It makes everybody look like plastic, so I did turn that off, but overall I was pleased with the portrait mode photography out of the front camera as well. Now going into this review, I thought the iPhone's telephoto lens would have the edge because it does have a slightly wider aperture. It goes to 2.0 versus 2.4 on the Pixel 4. But because Google is doing all this computational stuff, the images actually look really nice despite the fact that it's got a slower lens. So this was shot inside. This is kind of the typical thing you would take at home with whatever natural light you have. And as you can see here, it looks nice and sharp out of the telephoto lens. This is not a portrait image, so this is natural bokeh from what we got from that picture. And check out a very similar shot at the same exact time with my iPhone. It's a very different image, and it's also a lot noisier. So if we jump in a little bit closer here, you can see that it's doing a lot with this image in post-processing to really clean it up and get rid of the noise that you get in a lower light environment. This was really impressive. I could not believe how much better the image really was with this. And I'm seeing some other examples here and there that look better. Every situation, though, is a little bit different. Again, it's not going to be able to do a lot of magical things. This is sort of magical, but there are times when you're in really low light in a dark environment like this where you're still going to get those fuzzy, dark, noisy photos out of your phone. But that is really the reality of light and physics. But the camera is doing quite well, as you can see here. When you have some light to work with, it really can denoise quite well. But just know that it's not going to be perfect all the time, and you will have instances like you see here where things might get a little fuzzy. That might be where you will use the flash on the back here to light up things a little bit better. Now, Google has had this night sight mode on their phones now. I think it came out with the last edition of the Pixel phone, which allows you to pull out images even in really dark environments. So here's an example of one I shot at the end of my driveway. Now, I also shot the same image with my iPhone 11 Pro, and I do think the iPhone 11 Pro's image is better here. Both of these were handheld, and I set it to the automatic mode here just to have the phone decide what will work best in that situation. So I think the iPhone 11's night mode is better, but the Pixel 4 has something the iPhone doesn't have, which is Astro photography mode. And I shot this in my backyard last night with the phone. You can see part of the Milky Way here coming out. I do have some light pollution where I am, given I'm on the East Coast, but this was before the moon came up. It was better than I expected it would be, especially out of a phone. This is typically what I would see out of my digital SLR. So they've done an exceptional job here with this night sight mode, or this astrophotography mode. You can even see a galaxy here that it picked up. I think that's a galaxy. And I was pleased too to see that the stars are relatively in one spot. What I found with my SLR, when I leave the lens open for a long time, you'll start to see some movement and streaking of the stars as the Earth rotates. Here it's adjusting for that, and it gives you a very nice, crisp and clear image. Now, to get these images, you have to put the phone on a tripod or set it down on something stable, because if you move the phone, you're going to mess this up. It takes a 4-minute exposure, which means that it needs to be completely still while you're having that image be shot. But again, the output here is pretty remarkable, as you can see. This was a shot with a tree in the foreground. The tree slightly blurry because the wind was blowing over the course of the exposure here. This line is an airplane that was flying by, and you can see some of the Milky Way here. So if I was in a darker area of the country, I think this would look even better. But I was really excited with the image quality that I was getting out of this phone, which is pretty much on par with what I get out of my SLR that I bought about 5 or 6 years ago. I've been really excited about this, and I'm going to probably go out with my daughter on a really dark night and take a look at what we can find. This is like a really awesome gateway into doing more higher-end astrophotography with telescopes, and it's a great way to just see what's there that you can't see with your eyes normally. But what's not good on this camera is its video functionality. It only shoots 4K at 30 frames per second out of the rear cameras, 1080p 30 out of the front camera. So that is significantly behind what the other offerings are out there in the high-end space. And the image quality on the video isn't bad in most instances, but when you get into a low-light situation, there isn't any of that denoising that we saw on the still image. So here's a shot that we did almost at dusk, where my iPhone would normally do pretty well. This one was showing a lot of noise in the darker areas of the scene. So it looks like, although it can shoot video, video is kind of an afterthought for Google here. They put all of their energy and attention into photography, which is fine, but if you want a good video shooter, I think the iPhone 11 Pro is definitely the phone to get for that. So let's shift gears now to gaming. We ran Call of Duty Mobile on the phone, which is the latest game everybody's playing. It ran fine on here as expected. It runs pretty well on lower end phones as well. So I think the bulk of the Android gaming library will be accessible to you with this phone, even though it doesn't have the latest and greatest processor. We also ran the Dolphin GameCube emulator. That did very well also. We ran Wave Race, as you can see here. No issues there whatsoever. So if you're into games or game emulation, I think you'll be doing well on here, just like you would do on other high-end flagship phones. And on the 3D Mark Slingshot Benchmark test, we got a score of 7,730. And you can see that puts this phone well below the iPhone 11 Pro when it comes to performance on paper. But I do think the iPhone 11 Pro is making use of its significant graphics advantages here, and to some degree CPU advantages for photography, especially getting faster results after the picture is taken. You get more real-time previews. There's things that having faster processors let you do in real time that you can't necessarily do with this phone. There's always going to be a little bit of a delay post-shooting for that image to get processed, and that's been how the Google phones have been working. Perhaps if there was a faster processor, it could do it all faster or in real time. That's the big difference I think the CPU choices here are making on these phones. But for most people who are looking for a good phone that can run all the apps they want to run, this is fine. And actually, in many cases, the image output might be better because of that extra computational time that it takes to process the image after shooting. So I'm not finding much to complain about here. I do wish that the face detection worked better. I'm not crazy about the radar thing. I don't think it's all that necessary. But if you are heavily invested in the Android ecosystem, this is a very nice phone. The camera was better than I expected. I really just like how snappy and responsive it feels. Android has come a long way, and when you buy a Google phone, you get Google's interpretation of what a mobile phone should be like. They make the operating system that's in most of the world's phones, and this is the phone that they make to kind of communicate to others what they want that operating system to do and act like. And I think this phone really is very elegant and simple, and I'm very, very pleased with it. Is it enough to get me to switch away from the iOS platform? No, but it's closer than perhaps other phones I've looked at in the past. I'm heavily invested in apps and my Apple Watch here and a few other things, and I just don't see anything that would compel me away from the iPhone at this point, even though the images in some circumstances are better out of this phone. Now I've got both. I can certainly continue taking images with this phone as I need to, but my daily driver will likely still remain the iPhone. But again, if you're on Android, I think this is definitely worth considering. And if you want a smaller phone, I think the smaller version of this definitely might be something compact and powerful that will deliver a very nice and pure Android experience. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Chris Allegretta, Tom Albrecht, Brian Parker, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.